All right. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Sukah Daf Ches. We concluded yesterday's shiur by mentioning the opinion of Achedim, who holds that one may not fulfill his obligation of dwelling in a sukkah if the sukkah is round. And today we will begin picking up the shita of Rabbi Yochanan. By the way, Achedim is a Tana, Rabbi Yochanan is an Amoida. Must be that there are other Tanoim that argue with Achedim. Rabbi Yochanan not only paskins that a person is allowed to fulfill one's obligation of dwelling in a sukkah, even if the sukkah is round, but Rabbi Yochanan gives the dimension. He says that when you have a sukkah whose circumference is large enough to sit 24 people, that is the minimum size of a rounded sukkah. And we're going to spend the whole Daf Ches Amud Aleph making the mathematical cheshbonos we already learned when it came to a normal square or rectangular circle, whether we have Shitas Beis Hillel or Shitas Beis Shammai or Shitas Rebbe, 6 by 6, 7 by 7, Tvachim, 4 amas by 4 amas, which is Shitas Rebbe. Even if Rabbi Yochanan would subscribe to Shitas Rebbe, that means if the sukkah would be square, it has to be 4 amas by 4 amas. How did he get to the circumference in which 24 people are sitting? And as we'll speak out, the premise of the challenge will be that one person takes up 1 amma by 1 amma, which would mean it's going to be a circumference of 24 ammas. Here we're going to have the mention of the calculation of pi. It's way bigger than the 4 ammas by 4 ammas, as we'll speak out. I would like to mention perhaps the following, just a suggestion, that when we learned yesterday all the various Tanoim, right, that they shared the same principle, kula sfiralu, that a sukkah has to have a greater amount of permanency. The concept of circle and square, al pi chasidis, bekitzir, is that a circle is connected to soivev, and a square is connected to mamali. And the whole mission of sukkah is dafka to bring soivev, makifin, makif, debina, and then to draw down in a pnimius. So the goal is for sure to dwell in a sukkah that's closer to a keva, because you want to bring it down in mamali. And Bachlal, Soivev, who can live in Soivev? Living in Soivev, being in touch with Soivev, to begin with, is an Inyan Arai. Our goal is not to be there. And that's connected to our question whether you can live in a circular sukkah, that's mamish the concept, al pi chasidus, al pi kabbalah of Arai, versus the goal of dwelling dafke in a square, of bringing the Shechina down, dafke betachtoinim. So after we're going to go through all these cheshbonos on Daf Ches Amud Beis, we're going to be introduced to the shita of Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel holds, and we take a paskin like Beis Hillel, that a sukkah need not be originally built l'shem mitzvah sukkah. What we will learn is that a sukkah needs to be built originally to produce shelter, and not only, so to say, for privacy. If you remember, we had that also in Eruvin. If there was some hut that was built only for privacy, it's not going to be kosher to be used for a sukkah. On the other hand, we don't need for the sukkah to be built the shem mitzvah sukkah, but again, yes, it has to be built to provide shelter. And then we're going to learn at least Shitas Rashi that holds, even lefi Shitas Beis Hillel, that when a person is dwelling in a sukkah, it wasn't built l'shem mitzvah sukkah, but when one will look at the one dwelling, it has to be clear that they are there during the 7 days because of the mitzvah of sukkah. And we will see how that limitation will manifest in various scenarios that we will have on Daf Ches Amud Beis. Ultimately, we're going to be speaking about, it sounds like shemos, sukkahs that are included in the Rashi Tevos of Ganbach. We're going to have other sukkahs that are included in Rakbash. We'll see what they refer to and how all of these sukkahs will generally be kosher when a person will sit in them, as long, again, as it's clear that during sukkahs they're living there for the mitzvah of sukkah and much, much more. Let us start on Daf Zayin Amud Beis. We left off 8 lines before the bottom of the Amud. Again, right after we quoted the Shita of Achedim, who used a shoivach, a chicken coop, as an example of a round sukkah. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, sukkah ho asuya kikivshan, His example of a round sukkah is if a sukkah is built like an oven. Ovens evidently then were round. Rabbi Yochanan, number one, holds it's okay, but it has to have a minimum size. So here we go, Chavre. In yesh behekefa, kedei leishev ba chav dalad b'nei adam. If 20 people can sit, we're speaking about sitting mamish side by side along its perimeter. And now we're going to understand along its inside perimeter. I'll explain what I mean by that when we come to the Ches Amud Aleph. So make a circle. 24 people are able to circle is big enough, is large enough that 24 people can sit inside it. Then the sukkah has the minimum size, and therefore it's kosher. But ve'im lav, if you cannot sit 24 people, then the roundness of the sukkah is not its invalidation, but the size is its invalidation. Psulam. Okay, frag the Gemara. Even if we're going to say that Rabbi Yochanan doesn't follow Beis Hillel, that it's 6 by 6. Even if we're going to say that Rabbi Yochanan doesn't even have the Chumrah of Beis Shammai, which is it has to be 7 by 7. Even if Rabbi Yochanan is the most machmer, meaning he follows the sheet of Rebbe, that a sukkah that's made with straight walls, a squared sukkah, has to have at least 4 amas by 4 amas, still that would not justify his requirement of 24 people. Even if it's kerebi, the sukkah is pasul. So now the question is based on the following 2 premises. Premise number 1, michti, behold, gavra ba'amsa yosef, a person occupies 1 amma. Now we're going to challenge that on that ches. Actually, at the end, we're going to still subscribe to it. I want to make something clear from the beginning. 1 amma is not only 1 amma from shoulder to shoulder, but it's in both directions. That a person needs 1 amma by 1 amma to sit comfortably. And remember that. But we're not going to focus now on the amma, let's say from back to stomach. Now we're going to focus on the side by side. That you need to have 1 amma, which would mean then that if he demands for there to be 24 people, the circle, it's a circumference of 24 amas. Now we got the problem, which is the following. Number 2, that kol sheyesh behekei for shloisha tfachim. If we're using just as an example, if you have a circular object, right, whose circumference, for example, is 3 tfachim. So how wide will its diameter be? The Gemara, rightfully so, is allowed to approximate, and this is only a approximation, yesh boi roichav tefach, has a diameter of 1 tefach. This is really, as we know, the ratio of diameter, right, to circumference is 3.1, I'm sorry, it's
3.14159.
3.14. That's the exact measurement. Other times when the Gemara speaks about, when did we have this? I think it was in Yuma. When we had this Gemara, the Gemara says, Mino Hanamili. Remember there? How do you know? And we brought from the Yam Shel Shloima. And when we learned the Gemara, we spoke out. The Gemara doesn't need to have, even though everything should be based on scripture, but the way we touched the Gemara is that Mino Hanamili, how do you know that we are allowed to approximate? And so just to make it clear that 3 pi is an approximation, which is fine for our sugya. We're just trying to chop, like, how did we even get to the neighborhood of 24 people? Let's use pi. Let's use the approximation. So if it's 24 amas, and let's go in the other direction. Rava says it has to be 4 by 4. So let's take 4 times 3 pi. 4 times 3 is 12. So if Rabbi Yochanan should have said, even if he's taka following Rebbe, that all you need to have is a circle in which 12 people can sit. 12 people would mean a circumference of 12 amas. Then you make it into pi, right? So now you're going to have 4. 4 is amas shitas Rebbe. So betreisar sagi, why wouldn't 12 be enough? Now people, the first answer is easy to get. Daf ches amud aleph. But we're going to see, but getting to the amas, it will be very complicated. Oh, says the Gemara, hold on. You're making a big confusion. Don't use pi over here. Because Hanemili, when do we have this approximate 3-to-1 ratio? When we're taka beginning with the circle, and we want to know How much is its diameter? You're right. But don't forget that we're going to establish that this whole sugya is not halacha l'maisa, because Rabbi Yechanan taka follows Rebbe. We don't paskin like Rebbe. Rebbe says the sukkah has to be 4 amos by 4 amos. We paskin like Beishamai 7 tvachim by 7 tvachim. Doesn't matter. But let's go with the Rabbi Yechanan. It's not that a sukkah has to have 4 diameter. No, it has to be a squared 4 amos by 4 amos square. Now, if you're going to measure the diameter of a square, it's going to be much more than only times 3. For a square, by a tvei, we need more. In other words, the perimeter of a square is more than 3 times its width. No, we're not there yet. Take that off, please. Okay, but now let's cheshbon, how much more is it? It's so easy to cheshbon, even by just going to yeshiva without going to learning math. Because if every side is 4 amos, 4, 4, 4, 4. That's 16 amos. Now, applying the ratio of 3 to 1, so it's going to be 4 to 1. If you have a perfect square, so every wall is going to be times 4. So frag the Gemara, still, you're right. 12 amos circle is not enough, because really we're trying to create a theoretical squared sukkah. But how do you get to 24 people, which means now 24 amos? No, behold the second line. Kama meruba yoiser al ha'igol. How much greater? We're speaking about the perimeter. Is the perimeter of a square more than the circumference of a circle? But more than the circumference of a circle. Look inside the top picture in the Gemara that's inscribed in it. We're beginning now with that first picture in the Gemara. It's only a quarter, like we mentioned, because pi is approximately 3 to 1. If you have a perfect square and every wall is 4 amos, so if you ask a person, okay, what's the total of the perimeter? 16, 4 times 4. 16, 12 to 16, it's another quarter. Seder, so add another quarter. So Rabbi Yechanan should have said, Bishitzar Sagi. He should have said that if you have a sukkah built, Rabbi Yechanan's mashal is not like a chicken coop, but it is like a oven. You have to have a circle that you can have 16 people sitting shoulder to shoulder on or inside the perimeter. Mamish, 16 people means 16 amos. 16 amos means that if you would have placed a square outside of it, as you can see the top picture, each wall would be the minimum of Rebbe 4. How did he get to 24? So the Gemara goes another step. Well, hold on. Yeah, if you're placing a circle inside a square, then you're right by saying that you have to just add another quarter to the pi. But that's not the case. This is only true if the circle, right, is inscribed inside the square. So then you can say that the perimeter is only 1/4 more. But avol, what we really have to use to calculate our round sukkah is the second picture, the one that Kevin had on before. Avol ribuya, you don't need pi anymore. It's a simple cheshbon. Avol ribuya denafik migoy igula, but if the square is inscribed in the circle, let's focus on the bottom. Let's focus on the bottom right picture, whoever sees the screen. If the square chevra, or in the Gemara, very good, is inscribed in the circle, forget about pi. I want to know another cheshbon. My cheshbon is that if you have a perfect square and every wall is 4 amos, if you are measuring the diagonal of this box, if every wall is 4 amos, and here again, Chevra, the mathematical formula is only an approximation. Chazal used approximations. The approximate formula would be 1.4 in addition. So since the walls are 4 by 4, guys, 4 times 1.4 is 5.6 amos approximately. In other words, if you're looking at a square, if you want to place a circle around the square, the corners which protrude the most has to be inside the circle. You're putting the square. You're putting the square inside the circle. Circle is outside the square. So then the circle has to be able to go around the most distant parts of the square. And 4 by 4, based on the formula of 1.4, is going to be 5.6 amas. And now what do I do? Now I just go back to my pi. My pi
How do we
would
get
be,
to, what's that 1.4?
the 1.4 tzvika is that if I want to measure what area in the box takes up the most space. So if you were to go straight, it's 4 amas. When you go on a diagonal, because of the protrusion of the corners, the space that you need to go from one corner to the other corner diagonally in the square will be more than if you just go straight, due east, due west.
So that extra amount is 1.4.
That extra amount is 1.4, which would mean that if you're beginning with a sukkah keshitas rebbe of 4 amas by 4 amas, again, approximately the amount of space that the diagonal covers is 5.6 amas. Now, Chevra Halkap is being that we are saying that the circle dafka has to be placed around the box, around the square. Let's go back to pi now. What's pi? Okay, how you need to have a times 3. 5.6 times 3 is 16.8. 16 and 4/5. That means now you can't cut people into pieces. That means it would have sufficed for Rabbi Yechanan to say that if you have 17 people sitting in the circle, that is an area in which you can build a sukkah of 4 amas by 4 amas, and even no matter how you'll position it, even the diagonal will fit in it. It's pashut. How did he get to 24? Let me read it inside the Gemara. That avol ribua denafik migoyi gula, which is what you have to look at when you dafka place the box, the square inside the circle. You need to have a larger circle. Why do you need to have a larger circle? Don't begin with 4. 4 is not enough. Mishum mayrasha de karnasa, because of the protrusion of the corners. And again, okay, so let's add that. So michni, behold, kol amsa b'ribua, that every amma of a side of a square, right? I said tzvika that if you have 4 by 4 equals 5.6. But the Gemara is beginning with the formula. The formula we're using of 1 amma. If you have 1 amma by 1 amma, so how much more do you add for the diagonal? Amsa v'trei chumsha ba'alach soinim makes an amma and 2/5 in the diagonal of the square, which is exactly what we said again, approximately. It's not a perfect cheshbon, but it's an approximate cheshbon. It's 1.4. So if that's the case, so now when you have 4 by 4, you're going to end up with 4 by 4 and place the circle around it. And now you're going to measure the circle. You're looking now for pi. So what will you come to? Bishivisan 17 nechi minus 1/5, or 16 and 4/5, or 16.8 amas is enough to have a circle, which in it you can place the square, in it you can place the sukkah. So again, Rabbi Yechanan should have said, if the circle is large enough that you can sit, she's on the inside of its perimeter, 17 people, it will be a kosher or size sukkah, even l'shitas Rebbe. How did he get to 24? Says the Gemara, loidak. Okay, he was imprecise. Now there's a limit to imprecision. Says the Gemara, no. Emer damrin and loidak purta. Oh, you know what purta means? For sure, Rabbi Yechanan couldn't have said 16.8 people. It means really he should have said 17 people. You always have to go l'chumra. Loidak would mean he would say 18 people, just in case you have the skinny person. But from 18 to 24 is too big of a jump to say that he was imprecise. Tuba mi amrin on loidak. We don't say loidak, imprecise on such a large amount. So that's a big kasha. And because of that, sometimes the way you resolve the question is by challenging the premise. The whole premise of the question, step number 1 was that every person takes up 1 amma. Maybe not. Maybe we can say that every person takes up less space. It says the Gemara, Amalei Mar Keshisha, the son of Rab Chizda, to Rav Ashi, mi Sovrat. Why are you thinking that Gavra Ba'amsa Yosef, that a person takes up the space of 1 amma by 1 amma? I'm adding the by 1 amma, as we'll see in a couple of lines from now. No. Really, I can counter-argue. Tolasa Gavra, 3 people will fit Betarta Amsa Yosvi. They can sit in 2 ammas. In other words, if 3 people consider 2 amas, how much does one person take up, guys? 2/3 of an amma. 2/3 of an amma, which is 0.66666. So the Gemara says, well, you didn't resolve my question. In other words, when Rabbi Yechanan said 24 people, he didn't mean 24 amas. It's less than that. It's going to fit. The Gemara says, no. Now it's going to go in the opposite direction. Now it's going to come out that Rabbi Yechanan gave too little of a shiur. Why is that? Because guys, 24. Take out your calculator or use the cup. 24 times 0.66. It's, by the way, it's not even 16. Rabbi Chaim is here thinking it's 15.84. I use the calculator. It's not even 16. If he would have said 16, he's already being machmer, right? In other words, he's giving less than 16 amas. What did we just establish, my friends? That being that the premise is the sukkah has to be 4 amas by 4 amas square. If you want to make it circular, Rabbi Yechanan says it's okay. You got to place the circle outside the square. Placing the circle outside the square will demand, because of pi, for the circle to be 16.8. Rabbi Yechanan was not allowed to give 24 people. He needed to give more people. Because if you need taka, an area, right, a circumference of 16.8, don't give me a circumference of not even 16. Anan, we need, it's 22.66, which is, if that's the correct cheshbon of what Rabbi Yechanan meant, if every person only takes up 2/3, then Rabbi Yechanan is basically saying that the circumference of the circle, a circular sukkah, has to be shitza, has to be 16. No, but anan shifts and chichum shabein, and we already explained that really you need to have at least 16.8. So the Gemara says, now loidak. Now it's very close. It's really you need 16.8. Rabbi Yechanan says you need to have 15.84. 16, loidak. The Gemara says you can never say loidak l'kula. Never. Loidak is always l'chumra. When you pay a person, go try that. You give him a couple of pennies more, no nice, ayashikoyach. Give him a few pennies less. I'm not precise. You're not allowed to do that. That's only if you're going up. You're saying the sukkah has to be a little bit bigger than it really has to be, but we're not being precise. For sure, the larger shiur has it into smaller shiur. But l'kula miyaminin and loidak, never. You can never say loidak l'kula. Okay, so therefore, this solution of that, the step number 1, that gavra ba'amsa yosef, we're going back to that. You can't say that a person takes up only 2/3 of an amma, a person takes up a full amma by amma. So here there's one chat that answers everything. Amma le'ravasi le'ravashi lo'olam, let's go back. Take gavra ba'amsa yosef. The average person takes up 1 amma by 1 amma. The whole problem was that we are figuring, so 24 people is 24 ammas, which means we're saying that the circumference of the circle is 24 ammas. No. Rabbi Yechanan was speaking about 24 people that are sitting in a circle, and that the sukkah has to be inside of them. They're not on the circle. They're outside the perimeter. Now, guys, let me do this by heart. It's very simple. Let's go back to the approximate pi. If 24 people are 24 ammas, if you have a circle whose circumference is 24 ammas, what would be the diagonal? What's pi? 8. Approximately, right? 1/3. If you're telling me that the circle has to be inside where the people are sitting sitting outside of it, let's go back to the premise. Every person takes up 1 amma by 1 amma. So if you're putting the circle inside, I don't take away these pictures. It's not going to help anyone. Guys, every person takes up 1 amma. If you have the diameter of 8, but now you're going inside, it's not only inside 1. On both sides you have people. On all the sides you have people. So you're lost an amma on each side. So how big is the circle now? Not 8, 6. Now let's begin with that, and everything is going to work now. So says the Gemara Nachamal Omar le'Ravasi le'Ravashi lo'olam gavru b'amsa Yosef. V'Rab Yechanan makan gavri loika chashiv. When he said 24 people, he didn't mean that the circle has to be, so to say, on where people are sitting, which would then mean there has to be a circumference of 24 ammas. No. The circle is inside of them. So now, if I want to know the how wide is the circle, come have a little. How large would it be now? So we said it was 6 because 24 is taka 8 pi. If you deduct an how many? 6. 6 times 3, going back to pi, the general, is 18. It's 18. Come up to, he said it has to be 18. We're standing with our with the principle that when you are looking for the diagonal in a square, you do it 1.4. That's going to be the cheshbon right now. 4 by 4 means 5.6. 5.6 means that it has to be 16.8. 17 minus a fifth. That's already loidak. What's really, it would have been enough for you to come to 16.8. When Rabbi Yochanan says you need to have the circumference of 18, he went more than what you needed, and here you can say loidak. That difference of 16.8, which is really 17, to 18, here it's correct to say that the Amoida was not precise. He added a little bit just to cover all the bases. Okay. Come on, is 18. I really b'shipsa nechichum shasagya. 17 minus a fifth, or 16 and 4/5, or 16.8 is enough. Indeed. Hainu de loidak and ulachumra loidak, and now it's gavaldik. Now we're going to learn a few difficult lines in the Gemara. The last time we had this was in Erevin. We spoke it out then already that it's difficult to understand. There's no doubt that these great chachamim, they knew math. But let's read the words. The chachamim in Kesare, or the Dayanim over there, they didn't begin with the formula that every diagonal of a square should be times 1.4. They felt that the diagonal takes up more space. And therefore, based on their erroneous calculation that the Gemara says, they were speaking about some ruchnis they could think, because Begashmis, the Gemara says it doesn't match the math, it doesn't match the Metzias. They explained simply how you came to the 24 people without having to say that Rabbi Yochanan meant that the circle is inside where the people are sitting. Have 24 people sitting and build a sukkah inside of them. So says the Gemara, the second to last line, Rabbanan from Kesare. Other people say it was the judges of Kesare. They said two things. Now, the first thing we had above, we're just quoting both of their statements. The first statement is not negaya to our challenge, that a gula, the nafik, migoy ribuya, is ribuya. When a circle is inscribed inside the square, which is the top picture in our Gemara, then you have to add a quarter, like we mentioned, which is, in other words, if you have, like we said, if you have a circle of 3 tfachim, so the diameter is going to be one tefach, pi, generally. If instead of it being a circle, if you're going to have a square, what will be the total amount? Well, 1, 1, 1, 1, you're going to go from 3 to 4. Okay, that's one thing. Number two, that's chesam and beis, and the number two is there, cheshbon, that ribuya, the nafik, migoy igul, that the perimeter of a square that is inscribed in a circle. So what will be the difference between the circle and the square? How much bigger will the circle be of the square? So they said palga, oigavalt. Palga means that the circle, guys, you have to know how to type this word. The circle is smaller by 1/2. Or in other words, the circle is 1.5 times larger, 1.5 times larger, because of the diagonal. They didn't say it's 1.4. They felt it's much more than that. It's 1.5. Then the circle inscribed in it. Or in other words, if the perimeter of the square is 16, which is what we're saying, if Rabbi Yochanan follows Rebbe, 4, 4, 4, 4, forget about pi. So since the perimeter is 16, you have to add 50% of the 16. 50 of the 16, which is 8. So if you're making a circle around it, the circle needs to have 24. Only when you have a circle of 24 can you fit a box of 4x4 in it without the corners protruding beyond the circle. Says the Gemara, and that will explain. So Rabbi Yochanan meant people are sitting on the circle, and yeah, very good. We followed Rebbe, 4, 4, 4, 4 is 16. Now that you have to make a circle outside of the box, the circle is going to be 24 amas, because you have to add half of the sum total of the perimeter of the box. And the Gemara says it's not true, because the haka chazinon deloy have a kulahai. Like we said, if the circle's total circumference, total, will be 16.8. That's it, 16.8, not 24. You can fit a square 4x4 in it, and nothing is going to be protruding. And therefore, we have to say that the solution is that Rabbi Yochanan meant 24 people. Every person takes up an amma by an amma. The 24 people are sitting in a circle. If you were to build a circular circle inside of where they're sitting, all of them will be sitting outside, dafka, because every person takes up an amma by an amma. So instead of you having a total of 8 pi, you have 6. And 6 times 3 is 18. And 18 circle is way more than what you need, but what you need is only 16.8. And lochumra loidak. Okay, that's enough of math. Let's go weiter. Says the Gemara. Second line on top of the Amad of Chesamad Beis. Amar Rab Levi, Mishum Rabbi Meir. And by the way, this is also the hemshech to what we mentioned. Kavan asked yesterday on the chat. Didn't we learn that a sukkah should be aray? Yeah, it's the way we have to just say that it's really a machlokas tanoim. We're not speaking about exact scenarios, but just conceptually so. In other words, going back to the way Rava explains the first machlokas on that base, whether a sukkah has to be, whether if the schach is lamayla me'eslim is psula because we want it to be of more temporary nature, or if it can be permanent nature, that's really the way Rava understands that machlokas. Now, guys, we paskin like the chachamim. The chachamim hold that we don't want it to be that permanent. Now let's go to the other direction. How temporary can it be? Is there a point where the sukkah is so flimsy that it's not good either? There's going to be a balance to it. Now, the way potters lived then, and the way they not only lived, but the way they would sell their wares, is that they would build some sort of sukkah for the whole year. It was to begin with a flimsy type of structure. We'll call this a hut. And it was common for them to build a hut within the hut. They would live in the inner hut. Not only would they live there, but the majority of the merchandise that they would need to store, not to display, to sell, they would keep in the inner hut. It's safer in there. And the outer hut was where they had their machinery, where they would make it. And when people would go in and out just to buy a piece of a pot, they would sell it from the outer hut. That's the way they lived. So says Rab Levi, in the name of the Tana Rabbi Meir, that these 2 sukkahs of Yotzim that were built, they were huts. To begin, this is important that they are more of a temporary nature. Zoom lifnim mizum. One is inside the other. Okay, so says Rab Levi, and we're going to be focusing on 2 dinim that are connected one to the other, whether it's a kosher sukkah, whether it's mechuyev in mezuzah. Any structure that's built for a sukkah will be exempt from a mezuzah. Any structure that's built to live in will be chayiv in mezuzah. So hapnimi cannot be used for a sukkah, and that's a very important statement. And as we spoke out in the intro, this is that Beis Hillel, which we'll learn later, and we paskin like Beis Hillel, who is lenient, holds that a sukkah does not need to be built l'shem mitzvah sukkah. Now, obviously, a sukkah, a hut that was built for these potters to live in the whole year, it was not built for a sukkah. But Beis Hillel holds it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if the structure was not built l'shem mitzvah sukkah, but other things do matter. And we're going to have 2 limitations. B'shitas Beis Hillel. The first one will be here. Let's read inside Rashi. Rashi, 13 lines from the top of the Amud. I think it's Kedai. There's time. It's a small Amud. So let's keep one finger in the Gemara. When the 4th line in the Gemara, Hapnimi Yisene Sukkah. Let's begin. Let's find 13 lines from the top. Rashi, Pnimi Yisene Sukkah. We'll learn every Rashi in the Gemara. So Pnimi Yisene Sukkah Zok Rashi. Imbo Leisha V'Seicha V'Chag L'Shem Sukkah. We're speaking about that it has the 4x4. That whether he removed the roof and he placed chach or it always had chach, doesn't matter. It was there the whole time, but it doesn't matter. It was placed there for people to live in. And that Beis Hillel is good. But it's not good. He says it's not a good sukkah. Let's remember this rule. We don't need for a sukkah to be built only for sukkahs. Why is that? Because we follow Beis Hillel. That he makes kosher a old sukkah. An old sukkah means it was built and not for the mitzvah of sukkah. But there's a but, and there's really 2 limitations to it. The first one we'll learn now, the next one we'll learn in a couple of lines. But here ain't a sukkah. Why? Now what we're learning now is only midrabanan, kishitas Rashi. Other Rishonim have another approach. Rashi holds midrabanan, it's not good. You know why? The loiminkara milsa the l'shem sukkah hu dorba. This guy didn't change anything. He didn't change anything. We're speaking about the schach was there the whole time. He's anyways living there the whole time. So if you're living in a structure where it's not apparent that during Sukkot you are there l'shem mitzvah, don't confuse that to people who have in their dining rooms in certain areas they have now. It's easy. They have these machines and the roof opens up or retracts, and then they move in there and they sleep in there. There clearly it's different. They don't sleep in the dining room the whole year. And here they do. The people that sleep in the sukkah are sleeping in. We're not talking about that. We're speaking about a person who doesn't change his or her living accommodations one bit. L'Rashi, that's a problem midrabanan. Again, the loy minkara milsa the l'shem sukkah hudarba. The I'm just finishing the Rashi this time. Kol yemais hashana da'er Hassan. And v'roif tashmishoy visu udase vishi nasi sham. He didn't change any living habits by simply continuing to live there. So even lebeis hillel midrabanan the loy minkara milsa, it's not good. Guys, keep your finger in Ashi v'chayevas b'mezuzah. Let's go back to the Gemara. However, step number 2, all b'shem Rabbi Meir, but v'chayevas b'mezuzah, it does have to have a mezuzah. Why? One connected to the other. Zakir Ashi lo'olam. You always have to have it. It doesn't only mean put up a mezuzah. You always have to have a mezuzah. Bishum the chol dirasay ba. It's not like a tent that you will say you're not chayv a mezuzah. It's mamish. It's not a home. No. The sukkah of the potters is considered enough of a structure. You're living there. You got to have a mezuzah there. Keep your finger in Ashi. But back in the Gemara, but the outer hut through which you walk to get to the inner one. It's very primitive. The outer one says Rabbi Levi in the name of the maid is a good sukkah. Look inside Rashi. You don't have to knock it down and build it back up, or at least move the schach around. You don't have to do anything. Why? Because Nachamal, guys, this is the Beis Hillel. Because we paskin like Beis Hillel that you don't need for a sukkah to be built l'shem sukkah. What was the first limitation we learned? But during sukkahs it has to be apparent that you are there because of sukkahs. Yes, it is. Because the whole year the potter is living inside. Now he's going to the outside. Umishum hekeda the mitzvah, which is a rabbinic need, leka lemesar. You can't say that it won't prohibit you. You know what? Because the kivan, the kula shata, since the entire year, lav hachad do'er, he doesn't live in the outer room. And v'hashta do'er, but that is called a heker. When I go back to today, many people, they make in their homes, they take a room, they make it into a sukkah, and they move in there. That's enough. That's enough. Okay. Keep your finger in Ashi. Keep your finger in Ashi. Back in the Gemara.
Quick question.
One second. Hold your question. However, Ptura ben mezuzah, like it goes hand in hand. Why is it pater from mezuzah? Guy, this is not a din in Hilchas Sukkah. This is a very important din of mezuzah. Zok Rashi, lo'olam. It never needs a mezuzah. The lav dirahi. It's not considered dira enough. Why? She'ena asuya elo lotzeis v'lovai derech sham. There are two things that the outer sukkah is used for. For the potter who lives in the inner room, the outer room becomes a passageway. It becomes like a hallway, a place that he only goes in and out through. It's a through environment. It's not a living environment. And more than that, it's also, there's details. He doesn't even store his expensive pots in there. It's also in the inner room. The outer room is only ulahach nesham tagarim. When people make a purchase, you have to know how we would view this today. It doesn't necessarily mean that we would view it the same today. Many stores today are very fancy and they make it comfortable that you should people to fabreng in there with the whole chachma today in America, how to make people buy something in a store. But it wasn't that way then. Someone just walking into a retail shop, it's not called dira enough to be chayv a mezuzah. Again, we're not saying that now in a retail you don't need a mezuzah. It's very different. But it was such a flimsy thing that you don't have to have a mezuzah. Yes.
When we say that the inner room is not, it's possible, it can't be a sukkah.
Yeah.
We're saying in theory, if you were to take off the roof of the outer sukkah too and the inner sukkah and build a tzchach, whatever, it still wouldn't be good.
It would be good. So just to make it clear, that if you would then, even today, leniently, you would move the tzchach a little bit, shake it up and down, which means that you are placing now the tzchach l'shem mitzvah, that's much better. Here, the problem is that you didn't do anything for sukkahs. So Beis Hillel says it's fine. Beis Hillel says it's fine if at least you can realize that you're there for a sukkah. Okay. Let's go weiter. Now, now the question is only going to be on the Pturam and Mezuzah on the last case. That's Hilchas Mezuzah. What did we say? That if you have an environment that is leading into an environment that's Chayiv Mezuzah, we said that the inner room is Chayiv Mezuzah. The outer one, since no one lives in the outer one, it's only to people for you to do business, for you to buy and sell. It's so arai, it's not Chayiv Mezuzah. There was another rule. This rule now we paskin is only midrabanan, but it's a derabanan. That if environment A is used to go into environment B, if environment B is mechoyev and a mezuzah, even environment A, you have to have a mezuzah. And if you remember, we had this in Yuma regarding the Kohen Gadol has his chamber in which he would quarantine in. That is chayiv and mezuzah. So the question is, do you need to put him a mezuzah over there in Shad Nikner? Because he goes through it to his chamber. That's this halacha we're having over here. So the Gemara is asking, Va'amai, why are you telling me that the outer one is parted from mezuzah? Tehevi, why don't we view the outer room, the outer sukkah, kebei shar? Beishar means a gatehouse. It doesn't only mean a gatehouse. It means whatever. A gatehouse means no one is living in there. The way you get into the house is you're going through the gatehouse. And midrabanan, a gatehouse is chayiv mezuzah. No one lives there. Doesn't matter. Since the way you get into the house is through the gatehouse, so then the chiyuv of mezuzah extends to it. Kebeishar hapnimiyis, and therefore midrabanan v'tes chayiv mezuzah. Answers the Gemara, guys. These are very gavalik edinim. When do we say that midrabanan, a gatehouse, a passageway, a hallway, an environment leading into a chiyuv environment is also mechoyev mezuzah? If the chiyuv environment is considered a bona fide environment, it's a proper home. This ganze thing is already a little bit out of it. It's a sukkah. It's the inner environment is also not that kavod. Now, yes, the inner one is chayiv mezuzah, but it's not strong enough for you to then extend its chiyuv to the outer base, sha'ar, mishum deloy kaviyam. Okay. No, it's not, it's such a flimsy environment, it's not worthy enough to give the outer the status of a beishar. Okay, right. Now that we mentioned that in principle, a sukkah is good for a mezuzah, is good for a sukkah. We just said the hapnimius is not a sukkah for this rabbinic deloy minka milsa. In other words, you don't need to have a real solid structure. So let's go to how inferior of a structure do we tolerate for it to be a kosher mezuzah? We already learned one important rule that we paskin like Beis Hillel, that you don't need for it to be built l'shem mitzvah sukkah. We learned one limitation midrabanan, that if everything is the same, you did nothing to its structure for sukkahs, your living habits did not change, so this deloy minkara milsa midrabanan is not going to be good. Now we're going to learn another issue, and we're going to use mnemonics. Tanarabanan. The first mnemonic is ganbach. Ganbach is Rashi Tevois for the following: a sukkah that was made by goyim, but we're speaking not about a home, we're speaking about a sukkah, a hut. You know, it's like in the summer months, people could not take, there was no air conditioning, nebach, and they would go outside. But even outside, what would that help you? You know, if you have a sukkah, you have a hut, the walls allow a lot of air to flow through it. It's more livable. The nun is sukkahs nashim. And technically they used to weave, they did certain activities that they wanted to have their own peaceful, segregated environment. And that was a classical thing that they had then, a hut that women used. We're going to speak out of Tosfos, we have time, whether we're speaking about whether it was built for them or whether they built it, whether that makes a difference. So let's throw that up there, because there are certain mitzvahs in which we say that if they are not obligated in, they may not make it. I'll give you an example. A woman, soiferes, is not okay. Not because she's not competent, because since she's not mechuyev to wear tefillin, then she's not qualified to write tefillin halachically. So we're gonna touch upon a Tosfos and Gittin whether, and that will be very meaningful. Are we speaking about that the issue is that they built it? We're not going to focus on that at all. Let's bring a follow Tosfos. It doesn't bother me if they built it. It doesn't matter if a goy built it al pi halacha, even though he's not mechuyev. We're speaking about it was built for goyim to live in. It was built for women to be in. It was built for animals to be protected from the shade. And the chaf is kutim, and our sugya follows those Tanoim who hold that the kutim did not have a status of Jews. In other words, one might have thought that since it's temporary and it was built for people that are not mechuyev in sukkah, maybe the whole hut is not a qualified sukkah, or even something more inferior. Braisa says, sukkah mikol makoim kasha. But ubilvat shetehei misucheches kelchasa. It has to be covered properly. And what does that mean? In other words, the fact that it was built for people that are not mechuyev, even if it was built by people that are not mechuyev, it's not a problem. And all of that, my friends, is connected to the Beis Hillel again. You know why? Because we paskin that a sukkah does not need to be built l'shei mitzvah sukkah. So what does the Braisa mean when it says, but it has to be covered properly? Does it mean the typical halacha that you have to have more shade than sunlight? Well, that's something that's for every sukkah. Why would we have to say it? Michael Chasa. It can't be just that you have to have shetzilosim and there's no novelty here. No, Rab Chizda says there's a huge novelty. Amar Rab Chizda. For who sha'atza'a l'tzeil. Here we go. That the covering has to be so thick that it's recognizable that the sukkah was built to provide shelter. Now, guys, this is the nuance. Beis Hillel says the sukkah doesn't need to be built l'shei mitzvah sukkah. Fine, but the sukkah needed to be built to provide shelter, and not. There were certain sukkahs, certain huts that were only built for modesty. In other words, the covering was completely irrelevant. And let me say what that means practically. Even though if you have a schach that technically affords more shade than sunlight, mitzad dinei schach, that is kosher, we are allowed to put it in our sukkahs. That's because our sukkahs are built l'shem mitzvah sukkah. The moment you're using a structure that was there the whole year, that was not built for the mitzvah of sukkah, it has to be evident for someone who's looking at it that it wasn't only built for modesty. It wasn't only built for privacy. It was built to provide shelter, which means that there has to be more schach than only the schach needed to create more shade than sunlight. That's the nakoda here. Now the Gemara wants to know, Sukah mikol makim, what is that coming to include? We said it's even in more inferior types of huts. So the Gemara says, this Braisa is hinting, Sukkahs, next mnemonic, rakbash. What's rakbash? The Tanach Rabbanon. Sukkahs rakbash. What does that stand for? The Reish stands for Roim. Shepherds who are out there in the field, they would build huts for themselves to protect themselves from the heat and the sun. That was even more of a temporary nature. Sukkahs kayatzim, fig watchers. Figs would be spread on the field to dry out. You want to make sure that people or animals don't steal it. So during the times that they would be paid to be watchmen, they would build like this flimsy little hut. Sukkahs burganim, city watchmen. Or the fourth one is Sukkahs shoymrei peiros, people that watch produce. All different types of watchmen that would have a very flimsy type of hut during the times that they would be doing their job. Again, the point is that it was not built l'shei mitzvah sukkah, but since we paskin like Beis Hillel, I don't care that it wasn't built l'shei mitzvah, it's good. And the Braisa adds that even sukkah is mikol makim, any type of sukkah. What is he hinting to? We're going to see he's hinting to gambach. However, even though it's kosher, but here again the Braisa is introducing this nuance, this limitation to shitas Beis Hillel. True, the sukkah doesn't need to be built l'shem mitzvah sukkah, but it has to be evident. It has to be recognizable that the sukkah was lechatchila built, that the schach was built to provide shelter, right? To provide shelter, and not it was only built for privacy. Which actually means the way we're teaching that here it's not enough for you to have the minimum amount of schach that gives more shade than sunlight. It has to be a little bit more than that. People can see that was built to provide shade. Now here again, when this Braisa says Sukah mikol makim lasuye mai, so this Braisa is adding even ganbach. So here we have two categories of sukkahs, ganbach, rakbash. By the way, everyone agrees that all of these types are kosher as long as there is the amount of schach that makes it recognizable that it was made for shelter and for shade. Question is, which one is a bigger chiddush than the other? What's considered a even more inferior type? This is a machlokes tanoim. So the Gemara says, "Hi Tana di ganbach You know why he began with Gambach and he only included Rakbash Beremes? Because according to him, Rakbash is even more inferior. Why? Because he holds Alima Le Gambach. Goyim, Nashim, Behema, and Kutim. Why is that? Because these types of huts, you have to know the Metzias, was of a more permanent nature. Mishum de Kavi. And his chiddush was that not only huts that are of a more permanent nature, but even huts that were built to stand for much less time. So they were more flimsy. Which is even that is good, but why are they called inferior? Because he's using as what will measure, what makes something better or worse, whether it's more permanent or less permanent. And again, we're looking for it to be at least more permanent. We're not saying it has to be mamish, iron wall. That's the other side of the equation, but it's balanced. It cannot be that flimsy, but this flimsiness is okay. The other Tana that began teaching the dinim of Rakbash, and then it included, and even Ganbach, the second Tana holds that Alima Le Rakbash. Rakbash is superior. Right, the Royim, Kayotzim, Burgonim, Shoimrei Peres. Why? Here we go. Because these people are B'nei Chiyuvanino. Very good. It's used by people. We're not focusing on who built it, but we're focusing in on for whom was it built. It was built for men. Men are obligated to keep the mitzvah. So Tanilei, V'tanim, Yikamokim, L'sui Ganbach, to be Mechadesh, that even sukkahs that were built, the lav b'nei chiyuvaninu, goyim, are not mechoyev in the mitzvah. Women, mitzvah saseh, shazman gerama. Animals and kutim, our Tana considers them to have a din since they were geirei aroyos, their conversion was not done sincerely, that we don't accept them as Jews. So you would think that maybe, since it was built for them, it should be invalid even for someone who's obligated. That's even though sukkahs, even though the lav b'nei chiyuvaninu. So that's the second brayso that considers that a greater novelty. So it says that even that is good. Okay. And just to conclude today's shiur, I'm opening up on Masechtas Gittin. Gittin Mem Hey Yomid Beis. We spoke it out just a moment ago. The third Tosfos in the Amid Kol Sheyeshnoi B'Kshira Yeshnoi B'Ksiva. That's the Gemara that says that women are not qualified to be soifrim. They can't even write a mezuzah. They can't write. Because the Torah juxtaposes tefillin ukshartem uchsaftam. Women are exempt from tefillin, so therefore the Chazal say they can't even make them. They can't even write stam sefer Torah tefillin mezuzahs. So says Tosfos Mikan Amar Rabbeinu Tam the ein isha oigedes lulav. A woman should not bound the lulav together. Likewise, she should not make tzitzis. Because Kivan, the loy mifkada, since she's not commanded, here we are associating. If you're not commanded, you're not qualified to make it. So holds Rabbeinu Tam. Says Tosfos, ve'ein ira. I disagree with that. And one of the proofs that he brings is from our Gemara over here, Gemaldik. I'm going inside Tosfos that Ganbach is ksheira. Now, if we would apply the same logic that we taka paskin regarding a woman being a soiferes, then we would have said that a sukkah that was made by, that's the way he understood, that was made by a woman or made by a goy should be invalid, but it's not invalid. So Tosfos limits this link to the writing. So it says Tosfos v'dafka b'sefer Torah tefillin u'mezuzos, where the Torah makes this juxtaposition of ukshartam uchesaftam. So Chazal understand that's taka to teach you that whoever's obligated in Kashida is qualified to write. And when you don't have such a separate standalone limud, we don't say, if you're not obligated, you can't make it. And he holds taka that woman, not Rabbeinu Tam, but the Tosfos holds that a woman can build a sukkah. Certainly if a sukkah was built only for women, it is a qualified sukkah for men on sukkahs. Again, as long as you are fulfilling this new Rabbanan Chumrah, that it has to be apparent. Let's learn it so that Rabbanan, you can say it's maybe a Doiraisa, but it has to be apparent that it was not made only for tznius. It was made to provide shelter. To be continued.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Good.
The word sel means shelter?
What was that?
The word sel in the Gemara means shelter?
And shade. And not only for tznius, because there were certain environments that were only built, certain huts that were built, that you want to change your clothing in there. You didn't care that much about the schach.
Which Tosfos did you read?
I read Tosfos in Gittin Daf Mem Hey Amid Beis, who quotes our Gemara, Divrei hamaschil kol sheyeshnoi b'kshira. It's a very important
Okay.
machlokas. Today, many women can build a sukkah.
Sukah Baruch.
Many women today put up the sukkah in the backyard. You have a pop-up sukkah. You put it, and some things don't demand that much physical koyach. Many women are very strong also. Is it kosher or not? That's the machlokes